Hi, welcome to Dr. Gao's classroom. My name is Yin Gao. I'm a professional philosopher and I love classical Chinese poetry. I have been translating classical Chinese poetry for the last few years with a colleague of mine. I would love to share my knowledge on the subject with you. Your enjoyment is my command. Today, I'm going to start a new series on the connection between politics and poetry. Apparently, poetry played an important role for the great poets like Li Bai and Wang Wei to enter the bureaucratic system. However, there was another factor that had a huge impact on their entries to the bureaucratic rank. That is, the so-called civil service examination. In my videos about Li Bai and Wang Wei, I talked about their life stories and their poetry. I'm not going to repeat those stories, but I would like to recall the fact that Wang Wei passed the exam and got a position quite easily at the age of 21. Li Bai had to wait for 20 years to prove himself because he could not sit in the civil service examination due to his merchant family background. This means whether a scholar could pass the civil examination or not had a significant impact on their political career. So, you might wonder, what was this civil service examination like during the Tang Dynasty? What was the role of poetry in this so-called civil service examination? And when poetry was included in this examination, etc. Well, today I'm going to address these questions very briefly. I'm also going to explain and translate one poem celebrating passing the National Civil Service Examination. So if you would like to know more about classical Chinese poetry, please subscribe my channel. The Lunar New Year is coming soon. The Chinese people has the custom of hanging a set of couplets or chunlian on their doors. There are also a lot of poems celebrating the Lunar New Year. So I'm going to talk about the custom and show you a few couplets for the coming Tiger Year in my next video. If you like them, you could ask your Chinese friend to write them for you or buy the ready-made ones from the Chinese shop. I'm also going to make a video about the poems celebrating the Lunar New Year. If you are new to my channel, please check out my other videos on classical Chinese poetry, philosophy, or medical literature. If you like the content of these videos, please click the like button and subscribe my channel. I also offer one-to-one online lessons on these subjects. So if you would like to read the original classics, please contact me. I'll list my email address down below. Now, what is the so-called civil service examination? What was the examination like during the Tang Dynasty? Well, the Chinese characters for the examination are 科举, which can be roughly translated as selecting officials through examination and recommendation. 科 literally means to examine or measure up something in classical Chinese. Here it is extended to mean examining or measuring up someone's ability or virtue to see if he is good enough to be an official. 科 is also a term for classifying different categories of the examination, as in the phrase of 明经科, or the category of classist, or 进士科, the category of imperial scholar, etc. Examination for different categories were generically termed as 科考. 举 literally means to raise or lift something, such as 举手, raise a hand. And this is extended to mean recommendation, as in the phrase of 举荐, to recommend. From the Han to early Tang Dynasty, 举荐 was the way for the court to recruit their officials. Local magistrates or governors were responsible to recommend local talent to their superiors so that the state can recruit competent officials. During the early Han Dynasty, this way of recruiting officials became institutionalized. It was called 举孝廉, that is, recommending the persons with the virtue of filial piety and integrity. 科举 as a method of recruiting officials was first introduced during the Sui Dynasty and fully established during the early Tang Dynasty. It was quite different from today's civil service examination for public service around the world. However, 科举 and today's civil service examination are both methods to recruit a competent official to govern a society. It is in this sense, 科举 was the equivalent of today's civil service examination. So for the purpose of convenience, I'm going to call 科举 civil service examination. The subjects tested in the civil service examination varied substantially from dynasty to dynasty, but mostly include poetry, history, philosophies, and policies, etc., deemed important by the ruling class. During the Tang and Shang dynasty, poetry featured prominently in the category of imperial scholar and the classist, which were the two main categories to recruit scholar officials. The Yuan and Ming dynasties excluded poetry from their civil service examinations, but the Qing dynasty reinstalled the test on poetry. Civil service examination as a method to recruit officials were also adopted by other Asian countries such as Japan, Korea, and Vietnam. The civil service examination of this style were abolished in 1905 in China by the Qing court and replaced by modern education of science and humanity adopted from the West in their last attempt to save the dynasty, but the Qing dynasty eventually collapsed in 1911. Other Asian countries did the same at roughly the same time. The last civil service examination of this style were held in Vietnam in 1919. This is the oversimplified history of 科举. Here is a picture of the National Civil Service Examination held at the court chaired by the emperor. From their official robes, this was probably an examination scene from the Ming Dynasty. In the Tang Dynasty, civil service examination was held at the county, regional, and national levels. The highest level of civil service examination was the national one, held at the capital by the Department of Rights, or 礼部, once a year, with occasional exception. Once a scholar passed the last two levels of examinations, he was eligible to a post in the bureaucratic ranks. He would then get on the waiting list with the Department of Personnel, or 吏部, to be appointed a position once there was a vacancy. Candidates eligible for the national exam include graduates from state academies in the capital, as well as scholars who passed the regional civil service examination and recommended by their local governors. Most of the academy only enrolled sons and younger brothers from the aristocrats or scholar officials' families. But there was one academy called the Four-Gate Academy, or 士门学, which offered 1,300 positions, including 800 positions for commoners. This was quite exceptional considering this was in the 8th century AD. There were up to 50 different categories of civil service examinations at the national level. Among them, the category of the classist and the imperial scholar were the most popular ones because the candidate past these two categories were on the fast track for promotions in the bureaucratic ranks, especially the category of imperial scholar. Many of the high-rank officials of the Tang Dynasty started their careers by passing the imperial scholar category, or 重进士. Although there is still debate among the scholars when poetry were added to the civil service examination, most scholars believe that it was 681 AD. when the emperor issued the edicts on the categories of classist and imperial scholar, or 条流明经进士诏, which officially included poetry in the exam for the categories of the classist and imperial scholar. The candidates of these two categories were required to compose a text poem on a given topic with specific structure and tonal requirements on the spot at the exam. Since the civil service examination were conducted at the 3 different levels, the county, the regional, and the national, there were different names for the test poems, such as the test poem from regional exam or 府试诗, or the national test poems or 省试诗, etc. There are also test poems for assessing officials' ability to be appointed in particular positions or for promotional purpose. These test poems are given a generic name of 示律诗. The recorded test poems are mostly the ones composed at the National Civil Service Examination. Passing the civil service examination was a huge deal in Imperial China. It is the demarcating line between the ruling class and the ruled subjects. There were many privileges that was enjoyed exclusively by scholars and officials, including their sons and younger brothers would be eligible to be enrolled in all the state academies free of charge. Their income from their land were exempt from taxation. They are also exempt from the duties of labor for public projects or military services. They were treated with respect if they were involved in litigation, etc. You might hear that beating is still used as a punishment in Singapore. Well, that was the case for punishment in all courts in Imperial China. A plaintiff and the accused would both be beaten on their bottoms with their pants down in a court even before a judgment was made, because it was regarded as a moral failure if one could not manage a conflict on their own without going to the court. Scholars were exempt from such humiliation if they were involved in a court case. Of course, if a scholar were found guilty of a crime, then he would be stripped of his qualification along with all the privileges, and then he might suffer the beating and other punishments. These were just the officially allocated privileges. There were also a lot of other privileges brought by their political power once they were a member of the bureaucratic system. So, it is quite understandable someone like Meng Jiao, a Tang scholar official, was so elated with joy when he passed the national examination in 796 AD. Now, let me show you the poem that he composed for the exam. 昔日龌龊不足夸，今朝放荡诗无涯。春风得意马蹄疾，一日看尽长安花。Now let me read the poem line by line. 昔日龌龊不足夸. So 昔日 means past. 龌龊 means dirty or despicable behavior. But here it was more about the action a scholar might have to do to survive, as selling copied books or painting or other things to make a living before he could get a proper job in the bureaucratic system. So during the imperial time of China, this kind of work were often regarded with contempt by scholar officials. If they had to do them to survive, they were often ashamed of themselves, as in this case. So my colleague and I translate the phrase as an adjective to describe the low social status. 不 means not, zhu means worthy of something, and qua is like a boast. So the next line reads, 今朝放荡失无涯. So 今朝 is today. 放荡 in modern Chinese, it means behavior against the accepted social norm, especially overindulging in flesh pleasures. In the classical Chinese, it's more about breaking the Confucian norm, which were more restrictive than today's social norm. Maybe include flesh pleasure, but not limited to it. Here it was more about being relaxed and not worry about the Confucian norm about being humble about one's success. So the poet was saying, well, just let me enjoy myself for today. I would be the exemplary person or 君子 tomorrow. So we translate the 放荡 as relax. And 失 means think, and 无 means without, and 牙 means limit. So if you put these two lines together, they can be translated as, before I was a piece of dirt, not worthy of attention. Today, I can relax and think without limit. Now let's look at the next two lines. 春风得意马蹄疾，一日看尽长安花. So 春 means spring, 风 means wind. So 春风 literally means the spring wind. But here it's connected with another phrase, 得意. 得意 literally means satisfied with oneself. So 春风得意 is a phrase that actually come from this particular poem. So once this poem become popular among the scholars and officials, the phrase of 春风得意 was established with a specific connotation, meaning one is extremely happy with what one achieved, often referred to success in one's career. So 马 means horse, 蹄 means hoof, 疾 means fast. So the next line, 一日看尽长安花. 一 means one, 日 means day, 看 means see, 尽 means exhaust. Chang'an is the name of the capital, and 花 means flower. So these two lines can be translated as, I'm flushed with success, my horse running free. In one day, I have seen all of Chang'an's flowers. So the last line referred to a custom among the scholars. So once they passed the National Civil Service examination, it was party time. There were many different kinds of parties. The best known ones were called the banquet of collecting flowers, or 探花宴. The Tang gentlemen had the habit of wearing flowers on their heads or hair. During this banquet, a few young handsome scholars were sent out to collect flowers for them to wear in their hats. I guess the poet was one of the young scholars sending out to collect flowers. So he claimed that he had seen all the flowers in Chang'an in one day. Well, I can't find pictures of men wearing flowers and the banquet from the Tang Dynasty. These pictures are from the Tang Dynasty. So you can see the tiny flowers tucked in his head. It might look ridiculous today, but that was the fashion in the Tang and Tang Dynasty. In my next video, I'm going to talk about how the Chinese people celebrate their Lunar New Year. And I'll translate a few couplets that they often hang on their doors to celebrate the Lunar New Year. I'm also going to translate a couple of classical Chinese poems celebrating the Chinese New Year. So if you're new to my channel, please check out my videos on the great Tang poets and their poetry. I'm also offer one-to-one lesson on classical Chinese poetry, philosophies, and medical literature. So if you're interested in reading those classics on these topics, please contact me by my email. Otherwise, thanks for viewing my video, and hopefully I'll see you in my next video.